Unfortunately, we have reached a time when the leader of the Western world, the American president, makes the Russian dictator smile and brings European allies to tears.
It is obvious that the rules-based world order is under pressure. Let us stick to our values. Let's not reinvent them, but try to apply them more consistently. Allow me to conclude, and that is no longer easy.
In fact, after Trump's recent antics, it's hard to consider him the leader of the Western world. Especially since he himself doesn't want to be. He feels more comfortable and at ease in Putin's company. There, the idol is even stronger than in the movie Ghost. Donald doesn't condemn Putin for war crimes, and Putin doesn't condemn Donald for anything at all. Although, according to modern Russian mythology, being born an American is already original sin.
That's why we consider you to be lying, despicable scum. Just so you have no doubts. That's why we firmly believe that at this point in time, not a single word uttered coming out of Washington can truly be trusted. We are trying to negotiate with people who, even in the mid-1950s, still had human zoos in Europe.
Trump has always had an alternatively gifted perspective on the Russo-Ukrainian war. His rhetoric personally, and that of his conspiracy-minded guard led by Musk, has never been particularly friendly toward Ukraine. But what Trump started doing after he settled into the presidential chair shocked even his most ardent supporters.
Practically everyone is in shock right now. Not just us ordinary Americans who truly and strongly support him, but also many members of Congress. I could very easily give you plenty of specific examples of recent speeches by senators, Republicans, and friends of Ukraine who are simply absolutely appalled and deeply outraged by what Trump is spewing today. We have a lot of different, explanations for this. One of them is even his physical condition. Isn't this dementia? After all, you have to admit, he's almost 80.
Trump immediately divided everyone into good and bad. And for him, Russia is good, even though it attacked Ukraine to seize its territories. And Ukraine is bad, because it didn't want to give up its land and citizens to occupation and started to defend itself.
According to Trump, the Ukrainian leadership supposedly allowed this war to happen, a war that should never have started. In this way, the American president indirectly accused Ukraine, and specifically President Zelenskyy, of provoking and unleashing Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. This statement aligns with Moscow's claims. In addition, Trump stated that Ukraine should not complain about not being invited to the negotiations. The war should not have started 3 years ago. Instead, a deal could have been made with Moscow.
Trump is saying outright, Ukrainians are to blame for the war because they did not agree to surrender over the past 3 years. In other words, to make a deal with Moscow on its unreasonable terms.
I am very disappointed. I heard that they were upset that they didn't get a seat at the negotiations. They had that seat for 3 years, and even long before that. All of this could have been resolved very easily. Even an inexperienced negotiator could have settled this many years ago.
It's funny that Trump himself has already repeatedly broken his own promises to stop the war. At first, he wanted to do it in 1 second even before the elections, then in a day, then in 100 days. Now it's half a year soon, it'll be 3 years.
Can you stop the war in Ukraine in 1 day?
Yes, I can. I will end this war between the countries in 1 day. It would actually take even less time. I think it can be ended in a day. I will end this war in a day. It will take 1 day. I would make a deal in 1 day.
Maybe Trump really did expect to end the war in a single day. He probably just wanted to call Zelenskyy and order him to surrender and then calmly cozy up to the Kremlin ghouls. But the president of Ukraine politely declined such a generous offer.
I think the reality is that Trump, his entire strategy seems absolutely logical and predictable, as long as you understand that he's in a great hurry to have good relations with Vladimir Putin. And what is currently the biggest obstacle to good relations between the United States and Russia is Ukraine. So if only Ukraine didn't exist, then the US and Russia wouldn't have any conflict, and we would be able to agree on everything.
His refusal to capitulate became Donald's first personal offense. He genuinely doesn't understand how anyone could refuse him the king of the world, the emperor of the solar system, and the supreme god of Twitter.
What the hell?
Trump decided to show his utmost disrespect to Kyiv and personally to Zelenskyy, so he presented the Ukrainians with a predatory, exploitative agreement for the transfer of resources. And at the same time, he began sneaky back-channel negotiations with Putin. Without Ukraine, without Europe, behind the scenes over vodka, he started dividing up the world with terrorists.
Well, listen, if the President of the United States, God forbid, has lost his mind, then we're all in deep, literally, the whole world. Trump can't possibly see Russia or Putin as well as an equal player to himself. That's just ridiculous. I mean, come on, they use donkeys at the front and go on the attack in regular cars. And in general, they're in the deepest part of that very place. The progress at the front is minimal and the losses are horrific. Why on earth would he make such concessions now?
The president of Ukraine refused to sign the rare earth paper or recognize any results of negotiations that took place without Ukraine's participation.
But when we got down to the details, there are still no security guarantees there yet. If Ukraine opens everything up to the US and they invest and want to count on something, then the specific request from the US must clearly state what security guarantees they are providing to Ukraine.
And Ukraine considers any negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine as having absolutely no results. We simply cannot recognize any things or agreements about us without us. And we absolutely will not recognize such agreements.
This offended Trump even more. And at this point, as they say, Donald lost it. He switched to Russia Today mode and unloaded the entire body of Russian propaganda from the past 3 years. He claimed that Zelenskyy is a dictator who has usurped power, that he has almost zero public support, that he's the one against peace, and that Ukraine is the aggressor that attacked Russia.
We have seen this kind of disinformation before. We fully understand that it clearly originates from Russia. We are well aware of this fact, and we have clear, undeniable evidence to support it. Unfortunately, President Trump, whom I greatly respect as a leader of a nation we hold in very high regard, unfortunately lives within this disinformation space, and regrettably continues to be influenced by it.
Vice President Vance was so agitated by Zelenskyy's speech that he began threatening all sorts of Pennsylvania-style punishments for smearing the saintly Trump. But Trump is clearly under the influence of disinformation, or he is deliberately lying. After all, it turns out that, for him, Putin is not a dictator but a democratic leader, even though his main opposition figure was killed in prison, and Putin held elections in occupied territories, which in itself already makes him illegitimate from the standpoint of international law. However, for Trump, this is perfectly normal.
All right, that'll do for now.
But the fact that Ukraine, during a full-scale war, did not hold elections despite the will of parliament, the majority of the people, and the constitution is a sign of dictatorship.
Why did they even let him out of the hospital?
The talk about approval ratings is just absolutely ridiculous, honestly, because it was Trump whose approval rating dropped by 10% in less than a month in office, while over 50% of Ukrainians still support Zelenskyy.
The question isn't even about how much support I have. The question is what matters. The ratings we actually pay attention to. The number one issue today is how do we protect ourselves from shelling? According to all social surveys, this is the number one issue for Ukrainians.
Trump took offense at Zelenskyy and the entire Ukrainian people because they brushed him off and didn't go along with what he wanted. Because of his grudge, Donald decided to put all of America at risk. Apparently, he spent too much time with the pale cigarette butt and has forgotten that he's not the Tsar of Muscovy, but the President of the United States. And the American people won't let him misbehave. American congressmen, senators, journalists, and politicians have spoken out in support of Ukraine and the President of Ukraine. Many of them didn't mince words.
How do they live in Robitit? What kind of world does he live in? This not only contradicts the facts and the truth, but is also a disgusting betrayal of a country that is shedding blood, has fought, and has died for freedom. The president's capitulation is pathetic and weak.
Even Trump's fellow Republicans are now openly and sharply criticizing him. For example, Congressman Don Bacon specifically and unequivocally called Putin a criminal and a dictator, and also firmly refused to live together with Trump in what he described as George Orwell's dystopian world. Senator Roger Wicker went even further, saying that Trump's best friend, who is also a Kremlin moth, should be imprisoned for life or executed as a war criminal.
It's just hard to disagree with that.
Former US ambassador to the swamps, Michael McFaul, was almost consumed by shame and apologized for President Trump's recent statements.
First of all, as an American who regularly communicates and interacts with Ukrainian media outlets and journalists, I want to sincerely apologize for President Trump's recent words and statements. As an American citizen, I am genuinely ashamed and embarrassed that he says things like that, which, as we all know, do not correspond to reality or reflect the truth. For example, when he said that President Zelenskyy has a 4% approval rating, that's simply not true at all. And it's actually very easy to find several reputable polls and surveys to prove it. Secondly, I honestly think it's terrible that he calls Zelenskyy a dictator while negotiating with Putin and never criticizes Putin.
European leaders and an official UN representative have also unanimously stated that Trump's words about Zelenskyy's illegitimacy are nonsense, absorbed with Skabeva's milk.
Pay attention. The same event can happen, but the interpretation of that event matters. Well, that is, it doesn't matter that a blow was struck. Well, how is it? It is important, but that's not the deeper sacramental meaning.
You are, without a doubt, the most despicable person that I have ever had the misfortune to meet.
Obviously, Trump is not all of America. Obviously, Trump is now putting his own ambitions and grievances above national and international security. We don't know why Trump is so hostile toward Ukraine. Maybe Moscow has compromising material on him collected from his past close ties? Maybe, in exchange for giving up Ukraine, Putin promised Donald unimaginable riches in the form of gas pipelines and all the mines of the occupied Donbass. Or maybe Trump just fell into a vat of Solovyov's videotapes. We can't know for sure. So let's not take away Musk's bread and start dabbling in conspiracy theories. So it turns out that this is exactly how Donald Trump envisions America's greatness. Partnership with terrorists and conflict with friends and allies. How much Americans themselves will like this kind of greatness is a big question. But let's not be pessimists here. After all, we are, of course, talking specifically about Trump in this particular situation. It's quite possible, as history has repeatedly shown us, that tomorrow he'll radically change his rhetoric, hand over nuclear weapons to Ukraine without any hesitation whatsoever, and even go so far as to call Putin a mediocre comedian on live television for everyone to hear, which obviously is absolutely and undeniably true.
A young soldier is asked, so if, let's say, 20 terrorists are coming at you, what will you do? I'll take the ultrasound and shoot. Good job. And what if tanks are coming at you? I'll take a rocket launcher and defend myself. Good job. What if planes are flying overhead, tanks are advancing, and terrorists are attacking too? He says, General, am I the only one fighting in our army?
See, right? That's a good joke, isn't it?
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.